I'm a sculptor who's used plaster casting for the purpose of creating hollow wax figures for the purpose of casting them in bronze. This is a tipping furnace which I designed and used probably for 20 years. It's primitive, and that's why I understand how difficult it is to melt bronze. I was sculpting at the age of 8, melting wax crayons over a light bulb. As an adult, I went to art school, mainly Camberwell and a short spell at the Royal College of Art, and have practiced all the traditional forms of sculpture for over 60 years. I view our common history through the eyes of a practitioner, not a historian. These are all small bronzes that started in a mould such as this. Michelangelo has told us that genius was 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration, but we are mainly interested in inspiration. So the story has gradually reversed. It has become 90% inspiration and 10% perspiration. I believe we perspire about 98% of the time, observing, measuring, and finally manipulating the physical world in the hope we may trigger emotional memories in ourselves that will be communicable to others. If we are lucky, we artists may deepen understanding of the world about us. I will be showing you evidence for this unpopular belief along 3 strands of thought. First, how beliefs trump evidence. Second, how useful life casting is. And third, how smoke so damaged the Parthenon from 432 BC onwards that many sculptures had to be replaced, probably by Hadrian. I'm not the first to suggest this. Richard Payne Knight was disgraced for such heresy when Elgin was trying to sell his collection, but I have new evidence that he was right. Artists are as responsible for these misconceptions as the storytellers of art. Vasari set out to promote medieval artisans by comparing them with true artists, the poets. Though it is not entirely true, the idea caught on. Artisans became artists, and at the same time, observing life or life casts was outmoded, unthinkable. When I visited the bronzes of Riace for the first time in the year 2000, I immediately felt that these were the greatest Greek sculptures I had ever seen. I'd seen most. I did not believe what my guide was telling me, that they were made one in Athens and the other in Corinth, about 20 or 30 years apart. To me, it seemed obvious that they were made to the same specifications for the same monument. The poses and the quality of the modelling are so alike the bodies might have come out of the same mould and then been modified. Looking at the beards, it seems that they were made by 2 separate assistants, probably of Phidias. The workmanship is superb. They have eyelashes held in place by the whites of the eyes and irises of coloured stone. They have copper lips. The figure of A even has silver teeth. The surface detail of veins, muscles and bones is beyond anything ever produced by a sculptor since. When I came across the photograph of the soles of his feet, I was stunned. I'd never modelled soles. One cannot see them because they are being stood upon. Note the flattening of the pads of his toes. The bones are spread by the weight of the figure above. There's only one way that this could become so naturalistic, and that is by asking the model to step into a pool of wet plaster, which when set will become the base of the mould for the complete figure. On the left is a life cast I made myself for comparison. Why would anyone spend the time modelling a part so naturalistically that they can't see and will never be seen when the sculpture is in place? This is the actual wax taken from the mould. It's exactly what one would want to make a bronze cast by the lost wax method. The wax makes the void to be filled by bronze. This is the Apollo of Piombino and his soul. The restoration at the Louvre around 1850 caused a scandal. I suspect because it was cast from life. A strip of lead found in the core between his eyes proves that he was made by two sculptors from Rhodes around 330 BC. These are illustrations from the second edition of my book, Sculpture, the Art and the Practice, 2004. I describe the process of life casting in great detail and more about the ancient bronze casting process. I would like to correct this drawing. This is a method of pouring the bronze by tapping out the plug at the bottom of the crucible. However, two broken ancient crucibles without holes in the bottom suggests that the Greeks simply broke the crucible to release the bronze. This is the cover of the second edition of my book. The first edition does not contain the Riace discoveries. This exhibition from 2017 contains very many life casts in my view. Although the catalogue contains the bronzes of Riace, there's no mention of life casting, nor for the Apollo of Piombino. It would appear that archaeology turns a blind eye to life casting. I feel that art historians generally underestimate the need for constant reference to life. The shocking fate of the Von Braun collection should be on the reading list of every aspiring art historian. Well documented during Michelangelo's lifetime, bought from Vasari's nephew, venerated for generations, but mainly lost today since 1938's sale, due to the insistence by modern experts that Michelangelo would not have needed such mundane support for his labours. Therefore, they must be fake. This fellow from the catalogue is wearing a garment straight out of the linen cupboard. The folds on his right breast, not visible in the photograph, are clearly not created by the body beneath, but by folds in the cloth received from the laundry. This efebo might well be a cast from someone's actual boyfriend. The same may be true of these sporting figures, which are near to a portrait of particular individuals. Art historians today have a deep-seated horror of the idea of life casting. This is a modern idea which we've traced to Vasari. These sculptures from Chartres are very different from those observed from life or from life casting. They are the genuine products of imagination, not from observation of life. These sculptures from Olympia are contemporary with the bronzes of Riace. They were created before 470 BC. There's no reason why the hollow waxes used for bronze casting could not also have been cut up and reassembled to create these sculptures in the severe style. The advantages of life casting. the advantages of wax, life casting has been with us a very long time. The other part of my researches into the bronzes of Riace concerned the melting of bronze for the torso and legs of these two grand bronzes. Both were poured in one piece. Each figure weighs 160 kilos in bronze, so the torso and legs must weigh around 120 kilos. Add to this the runners and airs, and we're at least back to 160 kilos. This apparatus, which archaeologists believe was for melting bronze, is totally inadequate. One man with a pair of bellows would have to work very hard to melt 3 kilos of bronze. When we consider the amount of bronze needed for the colossal figure of Athene, which stood outside the Parthenon at over 7 meters tall, the situation becomes absurd. This scene is a remarkably accurate illustration of another process, the breaking up of scrap bronze to fit in the crucible. It's necessary to melt bronze as quickly as possible, otherwise the alloy becomes pure copper, which will not pour properly. The white metals, zinc, lead and tin, will evaporate if you take too long at high temperature. So the breaking up of bronze is part of the process of preparing for the melt. The man standing with a hammer confirms this interpretation. So I went to Athens in the hope of finding the remains of the necessary chimney. In fact, I found 2. The one in Athens was a mere 150 meters upwind from the Parthenon. The other was in Olympia. Both can be associated with Phidias. This is the top of a channel cut in the Acropolis rock. It is full of tar and soot. The channel would have been closed by a wall originally to become the section of an enormous industrial chimney for melting bronze. The wastepaper basket is perhaps 10 meters below the Phidian workshop and extends off to the right about 12 meters diagonally down the side of the rock. Here we see the soot suddenly ends, so I hypothesize a tower chimney attached to the channel at this point. There's no way of knowing how high it was. If it was only 2 meters high, it would still have provided enough smoke driven by the southwesterly wind against the rock and then rising up to the Parthenon, particularly to the west facade and the south colonnade. An early photograph around 1850, after the second disaster caused in 1687 by the Venetian bombardment that ignited the Turkish arsenal, causing a devastating explosion. However, it's clear that the worst damage is further back. The blackening of the west facade is the result of smoke from nearly 2,000 years earlier. The wall at the bottom defines the Phidian foundry. The black diagonal scar above the olives is the extent of the chimney section, approximately 12 meters. We need to look around the bottom for the remains of the furnaces. 3 were found at the bottom of the Olympian chimney. We also need to investigate scientifically the soot to see if it corresponds with that on the Parthenon, as I presume. The Parthenon is unfortunately out of sight in this photograph. It would have been just above top right. The passage of soot along the Parthenon See how the smoke that was trapped in the south colonnade was then pushed into the east portico and then filtered out under the sculptures on the east pediment, carrying pollution that when mixed with rain turns into acid. Under the knee of Dionysus there is less black than I would have expected. In raking light we see that a crude attempt at restoration has been made. See ridges next to the black on the inner knee. I guess this is the result of early restoration carving back the black from this area, which I would have expected to have been maximum black. See how his knee is rather narrower than one would expect, caused by this restoration. This is black under the skirts of the ladies next to Dionysus. The same ladies are particularly black where most work has been done, between the clothes and the flesh. The ancient Greeks picked away at the surface, crumbling the stone. This had the bad effect of bruising the stone beneath, which allowed the soot carried by damp to penetrate deep into the marble, far beyond what 4 cleanings could possibly reach. Somewhat further north, therefore further from the smoke driven along the south colonnade, but still plenty of evidence of smoke coming from below. The one clean sculpture on the east pediment is the Horse of Selene, which is clearly Roman, not Greek. Contrast the horses of Helios, also on the east pediment. They are dirty and the damage is very weathered because original Greek, while Selene's horse is hardly damaged at all. The west pediment is clean because it is also Roman restoration. The damage was clearly damaged by cannon in 1687. Selene's horse is probably the most admired and is Roman, not Greek. It has become the icon of Greek Phidian sculpture. Although it is furthest from the chimney, the original was clearly extraordinarily vulnerable because the nostrils and open mouth would have absorbed most smoke because overhanging the parapet. A final thought. Few Tuscan sculptors took 200 years to develop their art to somewhere near the same extent that every Greek sculptor achieved in 20. Elgin Arguments, 2017. I feel I've won the argument on the front cover. Thank you. I will be conducting tours of the evidence in the British Museum tomorrow morning, 10:30, and the evidence, of course, conflicts with established art historical opinion, but not with the form preferences of many artists. For instance, Masaccio, Mantegna, Rembrandt, Degas, Giacometti, and many others.